But yes, this week it is our top 5 favorite Oscar Best Picture winners, and this was very hard. We even debated extending it to our top 10, but man, oh man, we were like, no, let's just stick with the five, stick with the five. But it was very difficult. I have some on here that are near and dear to my heart because it's like when I started breaking into the film industry, what was my first Oscars and things like that. So we'll definitely dive into the backstory behind those films. But number 5 for me goes to Rain Man, freaking Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Ah, it was so good. I watched it for the first time a couple of years ago, and I mean, what Dustin Hoffman was able to do, I thought was amazing. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and Tom Cruise, being Tom Cruise, he knows how to lead a film and he knows how to portray that normal human being who's just concerned about their life and trying to move past things, especially when there's like big deaths in the family. But realizing and taking a step back that, hey, life has changed now, especially when you have a sibling or somebody with a disability in your family, and realizing that, okay, it's time for me to step up and try to take care of him. So I love the mirror to society that Rain Man really represents, and to show the comedic aspect of it, because it doesn't have to always be so serious when it comes to people with disabilities. Like, these are also just people who like to laugh, they like to
Yeah.
have fun, they like to be a normal person. And I think this film at that point in time in society really made an impact and still does today. But yeah, number 5 for me, Rain Man.
I, I obviously I love this film. I've always been a huge fan of this film, and I would argue that this film's success led to the demise of Kmart. Forget it wasn't Walmart, it wasn't any other store. Why did Kmart inevitably fail and go out of business? Because Raymond said Kmart sucks.
That's what it
It
was.
became such a mainstay line though. That film was so touching in so many ways, but like you just said, touched on comedic stuff with the Kmart sucks or the 97X, bam, the
Yeah.
future of rock and roll. All these like staples of pop culture that launched from that film was incredible. And I think, keep in mind, this is as Tom Cruise's star is beginning to rocket. He wasn't
Hmm.
quite there yet. This is almost to where he be, and yet Dustin Hoffman at that point, legend.
Yeah.
So for Dustin Hoffman to play second fiddle to a lesser actor at that point and do it the way that they did it, it's mind-boggling. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. The whole film, I love it. Great choice. Great choice. My number 5, because you kind of preferenced where you were coming with my list of films. I chose these 5 because, in my opinion, all of these films are filmmaker films. Every
Hmm.
one of these had at some point a groundbreaking element to it in film, whether it was cinematography, whether it was acting, whether it was audio, whether that hadn't been seen before. And so these are the kind of movies that I gravitated to as a filmmaker. And my number 5 is Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. Why did I gravitate so heavily to this film to begin with, to watch it? Duh. It was the resurgence, the beginning of the resurgence of the one and only Michael Keaton himself. This was after he had taken a long basic stay off, right? Nobody had seen him in a while. He was trying to, and this film, which I thought brilliantly did, poked fun at Keaton's success as Batman. The story behind this is a guy that played a legendary superhero, Birdman, got typecast and basically couldn't get taken seriously after that, couldn't get any gigs, tried to go back to theater, nobody would take him seriously, and what it did to him mentally and how he had to try to overcome it. Fucking brilliant. And then the brilliance of casting Keaton in it as somebody who had gone through it. I mean, come on. And then you had Edward Norton and Emma Stone and just all the people involved in this film. And then the groundbreaking. The entire film is one continuous shot. maybe. They kind of hinted early on that it's not, but it's edited to look so. But it had never really kind of been done like that before, and now many films after that have copied that. It was just so groundbreaking. But for me, it was the storytelling, the acting, the drama, and the resurgence of Michael Keaton that just really sent this thing home for me. Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance.
Very nice, very nice. My number four goes to Green Book.
Mm,
Now, I put this one on the list because I believe this was the first time I was watching the Oscars like all the way through. So 2018, that's when it won. And I mean, we all know it's, Driving Miss Daisy, Morgan Freeman, and yeah, if it's not broke, don't, or if, yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I feel like, with that film winning, it was only inevitable that this film was going to win. But this was also primetime Trump candidacy in the first time around. So I feel like, the world was kind of in a culture shock.
mm,
And this film really brought back a lot of, this is what happened when we all hated each other. And this is what happened when certain people weren't allowed to go certain places. Like the Green Book is real. It's a real book that Black people in the South had for restaurants, hotels, different places that they were allowed to go,
yep.
which is absolutely wild. It's hard to even think about as a young man growing up in, the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's hard to think about being in a place like that where this is the only thing or the only places you're allowed to go to. You're not freely allowed to go to anywhere else. But I love this film because I mean it shows the growth and the love and cherishment that you get from letting your guard down and getting to know someone who you read the book by its cover. So being able to put your ego aside, being able to put your first impressions aside, and realizing that okay, this is actually a good person, or this is actually a good thing. And so that's why I had to put it on the list. It's a historical mile marker for me. Like I said, being the first Oscars I ever watched all the way through. But yeah, number four for me, The Green Book.
Love it, love it. And the sad thing is that there's still areas in this country that are like that.
Yeah.
The laws have changed, but some communities have not, and they are
Mm-hmm.
people that are not welcome in certain establishments in certain parts of this country. And we've come a long way, but in certain areas, we've got a long way still to go. So I think these movies are relevant to remind people of that.
Yes.
It's a great choice. My number four, I've talked about this one on the show before, and for me, it's the pure brilliance of storytelling. This film, The Artist, is a film about the end of the talkies, the end of the silent film era, done as a silent film. Like to take a modern day film and tell the story of the end of the silent film era, or the talkie as they were known as, and do it as a silent film. Huge risk. Huge risk. Is anybody going to even pay attention to this? By the way, it's shot in black and white also. It's literally like you were watching a talkie. And a lot of people don't even like to see subtitles, let alone an entire film that there's not a line of dialogue spoken until damn near the end. And it's just, and I will say this, the two stars of this film were lesser known people. They were foreign actors who a lot of American audiences no clue who they were. So you're already taking a risk with the content of the film, the look of the film. Then you throw into actors that the majority of people don't know who they are. So this whole thing was a gigantic risk that paid off massively. It was huge. It became like this phenomena that everybody had to see. Everybody was talking about, which was just mind-boggling to me. And as a full-on filmmaker, it's hard to argue the brilliance of taking an idea like that and going backwards, if you will. Hey, we have all this technology. We have all these cool things. We can do CGI. We can do all these. Let's make a movie and not put any words in it. No dialogue. No, yeah. And I'm like, what? and to do it the way they did it is just brilliant. I highly recommend, if you're not a filmmaker, watch this movie. But if you are trying to break into the industry as specifically as like a director or a writer or a storyteller, this movie is a must see to show you how it's done, because it's brilliant. My number 4, The Artist.
The only one on your list that I haven't seen yet. And I mean,
Oh,
it's still on my list.
you
So
will
yeah,
love
for
it.
sure.
I know you will. Just every aspect of it. I know. I see how you approach things and the type things you watch and the type things that grab you. You'll love this film. You will.
For sure, man, for sure. Well, number three for me goes to Everything Everywhere All at Once. I thought this film was amazing because it was so different from anything else we had ever seen before.
Mm,
And the storytelling behind it, I thought was outstanding, right? Because we as a society, we unintentionally put ourselves in boxes, and this film completely busted the box wide open,
yes.
right? Being able to time travel to different dimensions and the fight sequences and having people resurrect their careers and just a whole bunch of different things from this film and the CGI and Jamie Lee Curtis and again like the amount of thought and effort that went into this film was very inspiring to see because I can only imagine what it was like to pitch this film to the said studio to try to get this thing made because I mean, it's crazy to watch, but when you're reading it for the first time, you're probably like, What the fuck am I reading? Like, what is
Yeah.
going on?"
Without doubt.
But I just thought, with how different it was, how groundbreaking, and how it pushed the envelope, it pushed the boundaries of what is a Oscar Best Picture.
Mm,
So I felt like it was well deserved. It was great for representation when it comes to the Academy. And it was great for up and coming filmmakers to see because you realize that you don't have to be in that box. You can write weird shit and it can get made and it can get an Oscar. And I thought that's what this film did. So I had to put it on the list. Number three for me, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
so good, man. I agree with that. Great breakdown. That's a great explanation as to why that film worked and why it won Best Picture.
Hmm.
Fantastic. Um, my top 3. I don't even have to say a lot about these films. I don't have to tell you the cast members. I don't have to tell you, what they were about, because everyone knows them, and they're on my list for a reason. And I'm gonna preface it with this: each one of my final top 3 were at the time considered the definitive best movie ever made. Period.
Mm.
Period. It was the pinnacle of filmmaking. And all of these at one point claim that title. I'm going to start with my number 3, Casablanca.
Mm.
All of these films are love stories set against the backdrop of historical time frames. The World War II, the 1970s gangster New York, the time of the atomic bomb. All of these are set that way. Casablanca is just that. At the time, it was an extremely risky movie to make about a love story taking place with the backdrop of World War II and Nazi dominated Germany and the Jewish Holocaust camps and all of these things going on, and yet we're telling a love story. And that people were like, wait, what? And yet it just worked in every possible context that there is. It was brilliant cinematography. It was brilliant storytelling. It was a brilliant script. The directing was phenomenal. Obviously, the cast. Everything about this made you forget everything about what was happening in the film other than the love story,
Hmm.
which is brilliant. If you can take that and make the subject matter such as it was and make everybody forget about the turbulent, nervous, bad time that historical time was and just focus on the love story. Focusing on putting your two lips together and blowing, right? Like that is brilliant filmmaking. And that's why I chose it, Casablanca. That's all I really have to say. You know who stars. You know what it is. You know where it takes place. You know what it's all about. Casablanca, number 3. Mm.
Definitely goes down as one of my favorite movies of all time. That's for sure. It's so freaking good.
So good.
Um, Number two for me is still the only film from a streamer to win Best Picture.
Mm.
Still the only film. I'm talking about Coda. Of course, this being centered around a young girl who's trying to make the most out of her life and her musical career, but she grows up in a family of deaf people. So that puts a lot of responsibility on her. And to be able to watch this as someone who, in my family growing up, no one had any disabilities, no one had any ailments to where like it made it, I don't want to say inconvenient, but it made it harder for us to live. Like, so to be in those shoes of someone who had to take care of their family, who had to kind of be a liaison for their family when their family is like a group of fishermen on a boat, trying to make money and working as like that. But this film was so beautiful. And I remember sitting down and watching it and just bawling my eyes
Mm.
out because it's one of those films that is so touching. But it's not only touching, it's funny. Like you laugh, you cry, you think about life, you reflect. Like this film brings all of that together. And it's honestly, one of my favorite films of all time still. So that's why I love watching all of the Oscar nominees, or at least attempting to watch all of them, because you do have those really weird, really out there ones that are good, the ones that are bad, but then you have the touching ones that are like, okay, this film could make a difference and start conversations
Without doubt.
later down the line. So I think that's exactly what this film did. So number two for me, Coda.
Yeah. I agree with everything you just said. You really do ride every emotion in this film. You do
Yeah.
laugh, you do cry, you do get mad, you do find yourself, yeah, literally every emotion that's possible you feel in this film. Another thing I think that this film did really just unique, because I've never had it happen to me in any other film. You both like at one point and hate at one point every character in this film. You feel for them and love them, and then there's other points where you just can't stand them and like, why are they doing what they're doing? I fucking
Yeah.
hate that kind of a shit. And I've never had that happen before. You either normally love a character or hate a character. You connect to them, but it's either because you hate them or because you love them. This film uniquely was able to make you feel both sets of emotions towards every character in the film, which I just thought was brilliant. I watched this one now with a whole new perspective because I am now a coda. Who knew? And the challenges that I am going through now at my age and with my parents' age being this, I I can't even put in words how challenging it is. So the idea that it's from birth, you are
Hmm.
dealing with that from birth on. I amazing individuals. The parents and the children that live this life and go through this from the time they are born till just I have no words. And I am so glad that somebody made a film to highlight it because I can't even imagine. I've had it for like 4 years and I'm just like so I
Yeah.
don't even know. My number 2, I
I'm surprised you put this one at number two.
I
Like
I
I,
went back and forth. I went
yeah,
back and forth. I really went back and forth. Um, and I think that my number one only skimmed it by a bit because of the scope of and what he was able to do cinematography wise.
makes
Otherwise,
sense.
I think it would have been the other way around. But my number 2 is obviously one of the most pop culture iconic lines ever to be uttered in cinema. I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. You're gonna sleep with the horses. You're gonna, you name it. People know this film, The Godfather. Do I really have to
Yes.
say anything else about it? Uh, it literally defined an era. It literally launched every single person's in that film's career and relaunched a legend. And
Yeah.
so I mean I don't know how you don't say that that is maybe the best picture of all time. Many people still argue that this is the best film of all time, and rightfully so. I would argue that it's maybe the best film of all time. I had to go back and forth. It's just brilliant storytelling from start to finish, and brilliant acting, and just it is again, like I said, the same as Casablanca. It is truly a love story about a family. Plain and simple. Forget
Hmm.
all the violence, forget all of the other stuff that's involved with organized crime and the mafia set in the historic backdrop that this film takes place. It is a love story and a family who goes through it all. And that is the premise and heart of this film and its sequels. Um and again, it's just brilliant storytelling when you can make people forget. I mean, the fucking mafia loved it. I mean, they were able to focus the story on a love story and show the humanity and the good in these violent gangsters. And when you can do that, I mean, come on. And what's it called? The Offer, right? If you guys
Hmm.
haven't seen it, watch The Offer, about the making of this film and how the mafia was so heavily involved in making sure it was portrayed the way they wanted it portrayed, and how the studio went against that and said, we're going to make the movie we want to make, and if you kill us, you kill us, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
The whole thing behind getting The Godfather made and how it turned out is just brilliant. And then, of course, you have the whole history of Ali McGraw cheating on Bob at the time of. There's so much going on during the making of this film. Mario Puzo, the screenwriter, with the huge success of Brando and Superman and all this. It's mind-boggling to me that the film got made, let alone became what it was. And so that's why I mean, you have to put this on the list. You have to. And if you've never watched the Godfather movies, just what? First of all,
Right.
what?
Where have you been?
Where have you been? It's like, I don't care when you were born. You should have already watched these movies. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, number 2, The Godfather. And if you haven't, go watch them.
So good, man. So good. Well, number one, this should come by no surprise because I've talked about this one so freaking many times. It's The Departed. The Departed is like my all-time
You
favorite
do love this one.
Oscar Best Picture. It's just the cast alone, man. The story is amazing, about a dirty cop and then a undercover cop just trying to navigate the mafia, which what is the mafia? The mafia doesn't exist. I don't know what we're even talking about
I
right
don't know.
now.
No. They're all
But
good people
they're
just trying
all
to make
good
a living.
people. Exactly. That's it. That's it. But yeah, this film, I mean, obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, Mark Wahlberg, so many other people in this film that just absolutely blow it out of the park, man. If you haven't watched this, please, please be sure to do so. But it's interesting now because I feel like Oscar winners, Oscar voters, I should say, I feel like their goal is to try to pick a film or pick, whatever category they're in, and they want the winner to be a substantial piece of art that could help people, that could change people's minds, that could start conversations. I don't know really what they were thinking during this. I mean, we know that the Oscars and the Academy loves hardcore dramas when it centers around the mafia, the Catholic Church, like so many different racism, like there's certain genres and certain topics that the Academy loves and they will always, always, always nominate. And the Mafia, I think, is one of those. And obviously with Martin Scorsese directing this thing, they killed it, man. Knocked it out of the park. So of course it's gonna be on there. So yeah, number one for me, The Departed.
It's timeless.
It is.
I don't think that gangster films or the interest in organized crime is ever going to go away. It's
I
just
don't think
something that
so.
people are intrigued about. And if you
Yeah.
get a brilliant storyteller like a Francis Ford Coppola or like a Martin Scorsese, it's a win-win. I don't think it will ever not be entertaining. And so, we're going to keep seeing them and they're probably going to keep winning, and it just makes sense.
Yep.
yeah, it just touches on so many things, and to this day, 2025, I feel like in the many of those families, it is still a thing. You have two paths. You either go bad or go good and become a cop. I really
Yeah,
do feel like that is so true still to this day in so many of those families, and so that is a history that is still prevalent, and it's a story that's not going to go away, and I love that. I love
agreed.
that. My number one, I've said it over and over, and since day one when I saw it, in my opinion, is probably the greatest film ever made from every aspect of filmmaking. How it bounces back and forth between timelines, how it bounces back and forth between black and white and color, how it bounces back and forth between the love story and the historical drama that's taking place, the subject matter in which it approaches. This film is 90% dialogue driven, even though it's about a big explosion. It's 90% dialogue driven. Um, it beautifully maneuvers a massive cast, in which point you don't ever feel like somebody didn't get their due.
Hmm.
Christopher Nolan is brilliant at making that happen. I'm, of course, talking about Oppenheimer. He's really good at, even if the cast is just 37 people, you feel like they all got adequate time. Yeah, and not many directors can do that with such ensemble casts like that. Um, but obviously, this film is to this day, it is still debated on whether that bomb should have ever been dropped. Are we the villains of this story? And many people around the world still argue that we are.
Yeah.
And even though we ended the war, we are still perceived as the villains for doing such a horrific thing and creating a technology that to this day is still potentially world destroying if
Hmm.
if used. And so, but again, none of that matters because it was a love story.
Yeah.
It was literally an Oppenheimer love story about him and his wife and how they were able to deal with what they dealt with, how they were able to overcome the emotion of what they were going through. It's a story about love between him and his brother. It's a story about, there's so many things going on between family and spouse and just relationship that it is truly, again, much like The Godfather, a love story of dynamic love stories between family, spouses, etc. That you forget, oh yeah, we're talking about the fucking atom bomb and dropping it. You forget about that for a little bit. And it's, to be able to pull that off is just incredible. And then again, from a filmmaking aspect, I mean, they created new shit for IMAX cameras to be able to do what they did. And that bad boy was a real explosion. I mean, a real explosion, guys. And then they caught it with all these like different type of camera things and effects and all that. Just brilliant. Just absolutely brilliant. So for me, that is why. And like I said, I flip flop back and forth. But I just think because of what he was able to pull off and the scope that he pulled it off in, it bumped up to number one for me. But my number one, Oppenheimer.
Well, there it is, guys. The exploding top five that is our favorite Oscar Best Picture winners. We want to know, what is your favorite? Please be sure to comment down below in the comment sections on YouTube, podcasts, add us on X or Threads. We love that. We want to start getting you guys more involved, so maybe you can start helping us vote for a couple of our top fives on social media. So be sure to follow us on social media at J Logan Austin and at Crazy Ant CEO so you can stay up to date when we will be running those polls.